if you don't understand what money is, then you don't really see the potential for Bitcoin, right? You see it as a technology or maybe just a stock even, right? But it's far more than that. It's a transformation of very fundamental parts of civilization.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Samson Mow from JN3, whose mission is to onboard as many Bitcoiners as possible, you know, through nation-state adoption. And man, he's got some very bullish news for you. So it's come to Samson's attention, there are some Bitcoiners that don't think Bitcoin can reach 1 million in a matter of days or weeks after the ETF money starts to flow in. Well, they're in for a pleasant surprise. Samson did the math. It looks like it checks out. Hey, we got a lot to cover. Let's get it.
The point is, it's happening. It's just not FOMO yet. And I think that will come. So your question about the timeline is, I would say within the next 5 years, we're going to see a wave of adoption. And definitely within 10 years, we will see HyperBitcoinization. And even independent of Bitcoin adoption and the efforts and things that everyone is doing, it would just happen because the other system is breaking.
Yeah.
Right? This is just fuel on the fire. The Bitcoin adoption push is just adding fuel to that fire.
That's a great point. So you think then by, you said 10 years, so 2033, we're in hyper-Bitcoinization.
Yes.
All right, let's start right here. In 2017, it took about 9 months for Bitcoin to go from 1,000 to 20K. The block subsidy was 12.5. There was a lot more Bitcoin moving around on exchanges. Mining was boiling the oceans, all the FUD, right? And there was zero institutional money coming in. I'm in the camp that believes this cycle is gonna be different. Same, but different. And look at that, 1K to 20K, 20x, 50K to 1 million, 20x. I think it's a lot closer than we think. Also, as we talked about yesterday, we mentioned Samson Mow, pension funds, but also he works with nations and different things they can do to adopt Bitcoin, from mining, bonds, putting it on the balance sheet. We've seen things in El Salvador, not to mention Indonesia and what he's been doing there. But if Jan3 is getting more requests for nation-state Bitcoin adoption, that's super bullish, my friends. So here we go. What Samson Mow did is he took the major institutions that have filed for a spot Bitcoin ETF, you know, $27 trillion of assets under management, and he put here, what effect does a $250 billion inflow to Bitcoin have over a period of days or weeks? Well, given the incredibly inelastic supply of Bitcoin and the limited quantity available, pretty easy to say numbers gonna go up. So what did Samson do? He took the total assets under management of all the Bitcoin ETF applicants, multiplied that by a 1% allocation, then he added the Bitcoin multiplier effect, divided that by the total Bitcoin supply of 21 million. What do you get? 1,404,761 cuckbucks per Bitcoin. And that's just with the teensy-weensy allocation from these people that are pretty bullish on Bitcoin. One thing you gotta like about Samson Mow too, he's keeping his receipts. I think we can say TXMC does not agree with Samson Mow's prediction, but Samson says, you know, the ETF approvals will unlock a tidal wave of capital, and as he did the math with the multiplier effect, $1 million BTC. And doubling down, he believes that could happen over the course of just a few days, because once these are live, how long do you think, and what will be the game theory for people to race to acquire as much as possible when there's, you know, 2 million or less Bitcoin on exchanges right now? Game theory is awesome.
Is game theory ever part of these discussions? Like, because obviously as Bitcoiners, we've often thought that if one nation state or central bank starts to acquire Bitcoin, this would trigger a competitive response from others that could get out of hand very quickly, kind of like a game of musical chairs. You want to be one of the first to sit down. Is that a component of these discussions ever?
Definitely. And I think some Bitcoiners may be disappointed that it hasn't kicked off right away with El Salvador, but I believe it takes time because there's still cognitive overhead to overcome in regards to Bitcoin. But I believe it's coming, and it's coming very quickly. The other interesting thing is just looking at the political landscape. So working with my team at Jan3, we're always very analytical about the political situations and re-elections in different countries. But if you look at what's happening in the next 2 to 5 years, actually 1 to 5 years, there's going to be new presidents and prime ministers in a number of countries, Indonesia included. So Ridwan, there are talks that he may be the next president or vice president of Indonesia. And that's very interesting. And all over Latin America, elections are happening this year and for the next several years. So this will change the landscape. And a lot of these candidates are starting to look very seriously at Bitcoin. And we're working with groups all over the world to engage with some of these politicians that will likely become the next leaders of their countries.
So those countries which have a lot of energy resources, or countries that would look to lower their total effective tax rate and thereby draw in foreign direct investment or talent, etc. It seems like there's a lot of advantages to be offered to, and people, we've been talking about this for a long time, but it seems like it's just now starting to get real. These ideas that I guess have just been abstractions in the minds of Bitcoiners are now starting to permeate policymakers' minds.
You don't want to be like some people out there, out here buying Google instead of Bitcoin. Yeah, that's a wonderful idea. Why don't you price it in Bitcoin? Doing that is stupid. But lucky for you, there's tons of resources out here. We're bringing you information every day, tons of free Bitcoin-only educational content out there, tons of great content providers. But you know what? It's never too late to start learning, and it's never too late to get on that lifeboat and start saving in Bitcoin. Because when you're living on the fiat standard, you're constantly on the wheel. You're racing harder and harder, but you can never get ahead. You can't even stay in place. And they constantly gaslight you. Inflation's gone. It's transitory. Well, why don't you take a look at this? Since 2020, groceries are up 25%, home values are up 42%, electricity bills are up 25%, natural gas up 29%, rent up 20%, used cars are up 35%, car insurance is up 33%, childcare up 32%, food, restaurant, chicken dishes up 32%, burgers plus 23%, pasta plus 14%, pizza plus 17%. And of course, meanwhile, instead of addressing the problem, the government is worsening it, choosing to gaslight the public by saying this Thanksgiving is the 4th cheapest ever. And as we are talking about Bitcoin game theory, we're going to get into some Peter Dunworth and some good stuff from Samson and Breedlove. But game theory, right? The incentives are there. If you're not going to benefit yourself, someone else will. And maybe you should get after it, because this guy just bought 11,500 Bitcoin for 430 million this week. We got a lot of stacking to do. So let's take a look at this whale. New mystery whale is DCAing like a savage. Hundreds of Bitcoin every morning. There's another 500 to their stack. They'll likely be one of the top 100 largest Bitcoin addresses by the end of the week. And Peter Dunworth hits on this. Michael Saylor isn't the only one that's really waking up to this, because you can look at El Salvador and see what your nation can do on the Bitcoin standard, just booming in every demographical category you want to excel in. It's also got a lower crime rate than the US now, so how about that? But also, you have Michael Saylor vindicating the business and corporation Bitcoin strategy. So why don't you go ahead and imagine yourself, your company, your nation state on the Bitcoin standard. And if you don't, someone else will, and they're going to jump on board and seek that opportunity.
I look at the demand drivers for Bitcoin, like what could create something like this. There are sort of two huge markets, I think, which could be a complete game changer from a demand perspective. The first is the energy markets, oil. There's roughly somewhere between $7 to $10 billion worth of trade globally in the oil markets. And I think they're the first people who should get this and want hard money, because it's quite symbiotic with what their operations are. When they want Bitcoin for their hard-earned oil rather than US dollars, that's the equivalent of somewhere between 2 to 3 Michael Saylors entering the market every single day. All of a sudden, what does that do when there are 2 million coins on exchange? Michael Saylor's got 150,000 plus coins, and you now have 2.5 of him entering the market every single day.
Chasing an exponentially smaller amount of coins. Yeah.
Correct. And this is where the numbers don't add up. The conversations we have about to share these thoughts, and this is why I don't like talking about the number that it leads to. I'm far more curious around the intellectual debate around is the thinking right? And this is the fun part that, being a study of finance and economics for the last 2.5 decades, this is the fun part where it's like, no, economics doesn't work in an accretive fashion when there's competition between, functions of money. It actually becomes exponential, not an accretive. So this is where I think, what you do and what I do is so important, that, we want to help people around us to preserve their wealth and, hopefully, insulate them from any economic catastrophes that are coming, and I personally view this as, you know, the greatest tool for doing that. And that's a very superficial reason for doing that. I think it has it will have a much bigger impact on society moving forward, and I think it has the ability to bring changes to society which are going to be hugely beneficial on a personal level, but also on a societal level. So on many fronts, Bitcoin, you know, ticks some boxes. And for me, I spend my days, you know, on the very low level of consciousness in Bitcoin, talking about price, because that's, as an investment advisor, that's what people want to
That's what people care
discuss.
about.
Yeah.
And this is amazing stuff. We got the 3 next countries most likely to add Bitcoin. According to Samson Mow, we got Panama, Indonesia, and of course, Argentina. And we got some more news coming from the now President Milei in Argentina. Do you guys feel like the freedom movement is really picking up right here? All across the world, the answer back to the tyranny over the past few years, I feel like is gaining a lot of momentum, and Bitcoin fits into all of that. Like we said in the thumbnail, the God candle could be coming soon, and, you know, people's lives will be defined by whether they understood or invested in Bitcoin. When the God candle came, where were you when the God candle hit? Hopefully, you'll be able to say you've been stacking for years and still feel the FOMO. The bull market is here. We know the spot ETFs are going to be a great catalyst, but all the narratives are changing. ETF approval, the halving, Bitcoin as a hedge against monetary debasement. It's all gaining traction. You should really pay attention before it's too late. Because remember, Samson Mow put, you know, a 1% allocation. Do you guys remember, you know, Mike Hobart dug up that article, and Samson has it here. In 2022, Blackrock released a study that indicated an optimal portfolio allocation to Bitcoin was 85%. The remaining 15.1 can go to equities and bonds. There is no second best. All right, I think we know what Samson thinks, but here we go, Petrichar. How high do you think Bitcoin will go this cycle? Well, that's a pretty sweet cannon right there. I got one for you. How high will Bitcoin go? How about Kenny getting cheesed listening to Heavy Metal High? That's where we're going, ladies and gentlemen. You better be stacking, you better be ready, and you better buckle up, because there's nothing stopping this train. I mean, you know, history doesn't always repeat, but, you know, it rhymes sometimes. And if, you know, in some way having cycles rhyme in some fashion, and you mix that in with the spot Bitcoin ETF, the institutional adoption, nation-state adoption, nations mining Bitcoin. I don't know, guys. Sky's the limit. You know, it's getting to the point where if someone's not making $1 million Bitcoin projection, that may be a red flag. Just like that, the conversation is now about $1 million Bitcoin, brought to you by the bulls that said all-time high before the next halving. Very bullish developments from the nation-state front to the spot Bitcoin ETF and institutional adoption front. But in order to seize this opportunity and get the best of Bitcoin, to be a part of that peaceful Bitcoin revolution, don't leave your Bitcoin with Coinbase or Larry Fink at Blackrock. You got to take self-custody. That is the revolution. If you need help with any of that, we got just the guys to get you started on your Bitcoin journey. Guys, Simply Bitcoin Originals are powered by the Bitcoin Way, and if you want to take self-custody, get your Bitcoin off those exchanges, well, as your dedicated Bitcoin IT team, the Bitcoin Way is here to guide you from start to finish on your journey to properly self-custody your Bitcoin. What's more, they've recently introduced 100% privacy-focused collaborative custody services where you'll benefit from advanced multi-sig security, inheritance planning, and much more while remaining 100% in control. Looking to get started or take your Bitcoin setup to the next level? Book a free 30-minute call using that link below. Guys, you don't want to wake up and that God candle hit and you weren't prepared. You didn't stack hard enough, or you didn't take the proper steps to secure your Bitcoin, get them off exchanges. Now is the time. Things are going to heat up in a major way. Having ETF, institutional adoption, and game theory are at play in a major way. Hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, share the Sound Money Gospel, set those notifications. We got a lot of good content coming your way, and some more interesting stuff on the Bitcoin mining front coming very soon. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, where we're getting out all the latest breaking news. Keep tuning in to Simply. We'll be your guide through the peaceful Bitcoin revolution. Hope you guys had a good one. Keep stacking those sats. The bright orange future awaits. I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.
If you prefer to go down with the ship, fuck you.